Thank you very, very much for joining the session today on conscious parenting. It is absolutely fabulous to have you all in here from all over the world. And it just kind of sparks so many amazing memories of those of you that have shared a journey with us, and maybe those of you that have still got more journeys to share. We only have a short space of time. And so as much as I'd love to just spend the rest of the hour connecting with all of you and finding out about your experiences, we do have the most extraordinary presenter today in the form of Sue Schroeder. Many of you will have met her. Many of you will have had facilitated sessions with her. So lots of you nodding your heads and thumbs up. And if today's session is about conscious parenting, then there are two words. The first is conscious. And Sue, I think, is one of the most conscious human beings I know. She's conscious of her impact on people. She's conscious of others. She's completely conscious of her own energy. And the second word is parenting. And having known Sue for many years and had the privilege of facilitating with her many, many times on some meaningful experiences, she is also the most magnificent parent. She has three extraordinarily magnificent children, Radley, Rachel, and Annie. And they are just lights in her life. And so she speaks with some degree of authority in this matter. However, she is also the first one to say that parenting is humbling and there's always a chance to learn. So Sue Schroeder, it's wonderful to have you with us and wonderful to have everybody here from all over the world. Over to you, Sue, and I'm really looking forward to learning lots. I've got challenging teenagers myself, so thank you.
Oh, my darling, sure. Excuse me, everybody, but that really did, as you can see, bring tears to my eyes. I'm completely touched with that introduction. I think it's probably been one of the most beautiful. Thank you, Steve, for, as always, your incredibly touching words. And ditto, my friend. Absolutely ditto. So, yes, I welcome. I gather that you're all here because you are all parents, whether they are not even one yet, or whether they are teenagers, or whether they are even children who've had their children before. But I think this message that I want to share with you is so much more than just you being a parent, but it's also about you as a human being. And the topic is so incredibly massive. And today I would love to just give you a taste of the possibilities that have certainly enabled my journey as a parent and got me to really see it as a complete gift, actually, as we all know, but also probably one of the most challenging roles that we have. And sometimes we kind of go, what the hell was I thinking? So, yeah, today's topic is exceptionally close because, of course, I'm a parent and I know the incredible influence I have on my children, and of course that influence that I have and the impact that I've had, that sometimes I'm exceptionally proud of, and of course sometimes I'm exceptionally not proud of what I might have done. And but I've also, just through so many interactions with other parents, just seen the incredible pressure that we can also put ourselves under to be this perfect parent. And we've perfect being what? I've also had the joy of really building strong relationships with young people and just also hearing their frustrations about being trapped and feeling powerless in that parent-child dynamic. And I've had the privilege of engaging with numerous clients on their transformational journey. So as a coach, and of course in the work that we do, it's all around people's journeys of self-development. And I've really, along those years of being doing that, realized just how unconscious they are around how they've been conditioned to be a certain way based on the way that they've been brought up and conditioned, and how this has fundamentally impacted the way that they have parented other people, or of course their children in this context. And so with that, I'd love to share some of those lessons and those insights with you. Some of them come from my own experience, some of them come from people's experiences who I've engaged with, and really just to trust that it'll open your mind to a more empowered possibility of how you can be as a parent. And of course, that is whether their role is a biological one or not. I mean, I think some of you might be on this call because you influence people growing up, you influence other children. So it's not just necessarily from a biological sense. And it's really not here to share something that's going to make you feel wrong in any way, but to add, as I always love to do, just a new level of awareness of something that perhaps you may not be aware that you're not even aware of in the context of this role, so that it leaves you feeling empowered from what might resonate with you. And I always trust that whatever you hear, whatever's needed for you right now in this moment of your life will stay with you. And then you choose whether you want to do something with it or not. Because what doesn't land for you, you might have already integrated into your life, into your role as a parent, and it doesn't really make any sense. So just take what you get and don't take what you don't get. And that is my invitation to you. And so what I share with you is on behalf of that person who is afraid to risk or to challenge themselves for fear of failing or disappointing. What I share is on behalf of that individual who plays small because they may feel unworthy, who holds himself back from being vulnerable for fear of being rejected or being seen as weak, who self-sabotages himself due to societal norms and conditioning, who is possibly unfulfilled professionally as their career choice was chosen for them or made based on external gratification rather than internal fulfillment. I'm also speaking on behalf of that person who's never satisfied, who constantly strives for perfection or to seek the approval of other people. And the person who is constantly overwhelmed as they're too afraid to say no or to set clear boundaries. And this shows up throughout a number of our ages. So where does this all start from? Some of you may have heard some elements of the message that I'll share with you, and we'll build on this. But as you know, from various studies from human psychology, we've learned that a person's first experience of life is in their mother's womb, where life is completely protected and a complete bubble of comfort. It's absolutely perfect, nothing out of place. And of course, this is soon turned upside down upon our arrival, giving us our very first taste of being completely unprotected and out of our comfort zones, where that threat response is activated, our fear, our anxiety, our overwhelm. And of course, we just instantly start to develop these strategies to protect ourselves, to alert our environment that something is not working. And we continue to try and create that comfort zone. And as parents, our natural response is to create that sense of comfort and to protect our children from being, uncomfortable or from being out of that comfort zone. We also know that from around the ages of 18 months, we already start to develop certain memories based on experiences throughout our lives. These memories that both have pleasant and unpleasant associations with them. And of course, always emotions that are attached to them. And those can literally appear in a nanosecond, whether that experience is real or it's even one that is just being thought of or perceived. But what happens is that during our lives, the more and the more that memory, whether it's perceived or real, and its associated memory is triggered, and we respond in the same way, the stronger it becomes. And with that, creating certain habits and beliefs that then influence what we think, what we feel, and what we do. These memories are stored in a subconscious operating system that operates our brain, literally running our lives by 90%. All these memories, these emotions, these experiences, and it never ever stops, that program. But what also happens on this journey is that we start to develop certain unconscious programs that make us believe that we can or cannot do, think, be, feel a certain way. Something that Carl Jung refers to as shadows, which speaks of the quote that we had in our invitation. Yeah. And so these shadows become these unwanted parts of ourselves that we then resist or deny, or we find ways to compensate or avoid. Some of the most common would include things like, I may not fail. I can't speak up to authority. I may not express my emotions. I may not be weak. I can't say no. I can't disappoint anyone. I may not take risks. I may not fail. So all these unconscious beliefs that start to manifest in our brains. And so we create this ego or an identity based on these beliefs that actually keep us trapped, like a box over ourselves, and that keep us limited and that also keep us powerless. And these programs not only rule our lives, but they also influence the impact that we have on others, because consciousness being a very powerful unconscious power that we have, a source of energy that's literally like a vibration in our lives, literally creates this ripple effect from me to others, and of course influence how the way we parent our children or those that we might be responsible for rearing. So I want to give you a couple of examples that may resonate with you, and take a note of which ones might. So for an example, one might grow up with a very dictatorial or authoritarian father figure who insists on making decisions for you. You don't know what you need. I know more than you, etc., etc. So perhaps that father may have had a dictatorial father themselves, or perhaps even an absent one who then tries to replicate or compensate for what they did or didn't have. That subconscious program is created that makes you feel that you're not capable to make up your own mind, and hence you don't have a voice. You may appear indecisive or even non-committal and spend the rest of your life waiting for someone to take responsibility for your decisions and actions. And that cycle perpetuates itself by either you being a dictatorial person or a distant one to your children, who then replicate the same behavior. A person is possibly brought up with a bit of chaos or disorder, so no sense of certainty or clarity in their lives, causing immense anxiety, and may then parent in a way to ensure that their children never experience the same discomfort, ensuring that everything is perfect, nothing is out of place, that they never ever suffer, never face hardships. And so what their children learn is that perfection is the only way that life works, that disorder is unacceptable, and hence always avoid putting themselves in positions that might create that, stretch them out of their comfort zone, rumble them a little bit, or even provide them opportunities to possibly fail. So perhaps there's another example that I'd love to share where one may have grown up with parents that were totally dedicated to their every whim, even to their own detriment as a parent, putting themselves second, not looking after themselves. But what they're actually instilling in their children is that putting themselves first, or self-care, is not important. And of course, then your children replicate this and end up suffering from various stress-related diseases, which we know are immense in our young people today. Someone might have grown up in a home that really struggled financially, creating a fear of never having enough. Hence, either hoarded or spent unwisely, that then had a ripple effect on their children, who may have learned to live from a lack of, or never really valuing their finances. And of course, then that pattern of suffering just continues and continues. Or perhaps even as a result, pursued a profession that they were guaranteed to earn them financial abundance, to avoid experiencing the same anxiety or stress, irrespective of whether they were fulfilled, which of course then may have impacted their health. And of course, we know today the huge percentage of people that are actually pursuing a profession that they actually don't like, which causes immense stress. One grew up experiencing that the only form of attention or acknowledgement might have come from doing well, what you earned, the grades, the awards, the achievements. And so that child is then influenced in the same way, that constantly seeks accolades to feel worthy. And if that's not received, then perpetuates a belief of perhaps not being good enough, not having what it takes, and living from a program that acknowledgement only comes from what I do rather than who I am. And then, of course, never experiencing unconditional love or self-fulfillment. And there are so many examples that it may include things like never setting boundaries or saying no for fear of resentment or rejection, not allowing oneself to express one's emotion, maybe having words said like, pull yourself together, you don't want to be seen as weak. Or maybe even filling their days to the brim because that's all they know, so that they're not seen as being lazy or unproductive, because that's exactly the program that they've been conditioned to believe is the truth. Make sense? I can only see a few pictures, so for those of you who are able to nod, I'm just so happy to see your smiling faces. And so these fears of not being good enough, not having what it takes, the fear of being rejected are really manifested, and as I said, just can be literally triggered in a nanosecond, influencing those automatic reactions where we hold ourselves back, we don't fully express ourselves, we perhaps maybe shut people out because these fears are actually experienced as emotional pain, and we unconsciously parent in a way that actually prevents our children from either experiencing the same pain that we had or acting in the same way as we were brought up, because that's all we know. I remember such a beautiful story one day when I was driving the car and my daughter kept on moaning at me about, oh, mom, but this and that, the next thing, and giving me a hard time being a parent. And I was really feeling like I was not doing this job properly. And so I actually stopped and I said to her, you know what, my darling? I said, I don't know if you realize that mom never really had a manual to be your parent. She looked at me funny. And I said, yeah, I didn't have a manual. I only learned from what I grew up with. So you know what? Perhaps we should try this together. And she looked at me. She says, good point, Mum. I never ever thought about it that way. It was so beautiful. But really, and it is so true, because we put ourselves under huge pressure. We don't see perhaps why we do the things that we do. So what happens, and I'm going to go back, is that the more that these subconscious programs run our lives, remember, the more we attract the same experiences. And if we don't start to create a healthy relationship to all those fears and embracing them to use them for our growth, they will keep us trapped, and they will also keep our children feeling powerless and trapped and perpetuating a habit from one generation to the next. Just consider that the more we embrace our fears rather than resist them, the less they will start to show up for you, and the less they'll also impact your children. It's almost like starting from a clean slate. As Carl Jung said again, until we make that unconscious conscious, it'll literally run our lives and we'll call it fate. So I just want you to take a minute or just to ponder for a few seconds and think about what might be some of the experiences or the programs that might actually be running you, might be running how you might be showing up, what you might be instilling in your children. What fears perhaps could you identify based on what I've shared with you up until this point? And what actually might be the impact that it's having? Remember, this isn't about making you wrong, but it's about maybe seeing something for yourself, that now you have the choice whether you perpetuate that or not. Let's take a note of what it is might have stood out for you. And we will have time for questions in a bit. I'll just finish what I'll be sharing. All right. I know there's a recording, so you can always get access to that too. So this is really in essence about what conscious parenting is. So I'm definitely not going to give you rules 1 to 10 of how to be a conscious parent, but an insight. So there's a woman called Dr. Shefali Tsabary, and I love her work, and I know Nix is going to share the details with you. There is actually a black screen. I know there's a message. Thank you, Nix. Okay. So she's an expert in this field and has some remarkable content and research about this conscious parenting. But what she actually says is that conscious parenting is one where we allow the role as a parent not only to be a journey for our children, but actually for our own growth and our own transformation. As one of the greatest ways that we can actually recognize these fears, these triggers, these programs are indeed our children. There are such great insights to what we may not be allowing or ourselves, or what we make wrong because of our experiences and backgrounds, etc., because they really start to represent those very, very elements that we may not be conscious of, not giving permission for, or are perhaps ruled by. So perhaps if disorder is a fear for you, and you constantly strive for creating perfection because you don't allow that disorder, you may possibly find that you have a child who is seriously disorderly, who causes chaos wherever they go, and will continue to do so until you lessen making that very behavior wrong and constantly trying to correct them, but just allowing it, because of course there's magic in allowing the things that we resist and avoid. Perhaps we're afraid of losing control, so we perpetuate the need to control, to dominate everything as a parent. And my goodness, even though we don't like that thing about ourselves, you might end up having a child who really challenges you by constantly controlling you in various forms and ways. Or perhaps that you may have made being emotional, being vulnerable, wrong. You weren't allowed to, express that yourself. So you end up having a child that is possibly exceptionally emotional, which can be quite draining for you. But remember, it's just a sign for you to start to integrate something for you. Or perhaps you never allow yourself time to do nothing because you're so afraid of being seen as lazy. You were brought up saying you've got to be busy, you've got to be active, and constantly having your time filled. But then, of course, one of your children represents that very element of laziness that you just keep avoiding over and over again. Or perhaps you don't allow yourself to take risks for fear of failing and putting yourself out of a comfort zone and finding yourself with a child that is constantly living on the edge, pushing the boundaries. Hey, Martin, I see your face is nodding, and which is so beautiful. Again, it's just such an incredible opportunity for you to see something there for yourself that possibly you're not allowing or resisting. And so conscious parenting really is about letting go of all of those things that we think we should or shouldn't be. And we go on that journey with our children to really create such a unique and empowering dynamic together. So we learn from one another, because as human beings, we are whole. We're born having everything, and it's only through our conditioning that we start to chip away the things that we just don't allow ourselves to be, which doesn't actually allow us to be full, whole, and authentic human beings. So it's actually about being with what shows up for you, not getting lost in our fears or our anxieties, perhaps even our guilt of maybe what we did or didn't do, but of course we knew no better, or shame about past, or possibly even anxiety about our future because, I just don't know if I'm ever going to provide or ever be good enough, etc. But really just courageously stepping into owning all of those things so that they no longer impact who we are anymore and how we show up, especially when those things are no longer serving us. And of course, they're not serving others, and particularly our children. So it's really about giving ourselves permission to be whole and to be true, absolutely unconditionally. And of course, because we do that, all of a sudden we start to experience such an incredible sense of freedom and power. And I'm not saying power in terms of forceful power, but just an innate, energetic, powerful force that really has this incredible ripple effect on yourself, and then of course you on your children as well. And I really believe that we actually parenting in such a kind of almost challenging world today, because we really parenting children who are coming from a completely different level of consciousness, one that requires things like compassion, creativity, courage, self-awareness, agility, feedback, being vulnerable, being in the pursuit of one's fulfillment and passion, being truly authentic and true, and also one that requires us to take on a huge amount of responsibility. And when you think about those things for a while, how often do we even read about them? We expose ourselves to them. The question that I have is, are we enabling or are we disempowering our children by being attached to our conditioning that is not allowing them the compassion, the creativity, the agility, and the things that actually our world today is requiring from them? And as Albert Einstein so powerfully says, and I always just love this quote, that we cannot solve the problems of today with the same level of thinking that created them in the first place. We've got to shift the way we think. We've got to shift that element of consciousness that we bring so that we are the change, as Gandhi says, that we want to actually see happening in our world. And this is the power of conscious parenting. And so I want to just share with you a couple of things that we could possibly start to consider on that journey. And of course, you may already be doing it, you may not, but this certainly has been something that has reflected quite powerfully for me. So the first step into any change or any shift or any transformation that we want to experience is just to allow ourselves to become aware. And it's about allowing ourselves to become aware, especially in those areas that cause that discomfort, make us feel a little bit out of our comfort zone, and just to start to see, really see what experiences, what fears, what judgments might actually be owning our lives. Because when we do that, we are then able to make far more conscious choices to be able to shift those. If we're unaware of something, we just can't make a difference. But it's just actually allowing yourself to see and like going, oh, wow, okay, that wasn't so comfortable, but what message can I actually derive from this? Okay. So, and as I said, because when we start to actually recognize these, then we start to allow those powers of consciousness to really be a force within us, around us, and trusting that what you do and what you allow from the insight that you get from what you see and the change that you start to integrate for yourself will then be reflected on your children. And of course, with that, your children then start to influence other people around them. And then slowly, bit by bit, we actually make the world a far more conscious place. And one of the laws, in fact, there's an amazing book called The Laws of Nature, and one of them is called The Laws of Resonance, is that whatever we experience on the outside world and whatever we impact outside is a complete reflection of what we believe to be the truth within us. So let's have a look and see what we need to be able to actually allow this power of consciousness to become present in our lives. And so firstly, it's actually just about creating the space to recognize these reactions, to recognize all these old programs and leveraging those fears, leveraging those triggers that might represent in our children. Of course, they might be represented in other people too, but your children are just such a safe place to see that and to then empower your journey as a human being. And to be constantly present to do so. And that presence is about decluttering our minds from the 60,000 odd thoughts, literally, if you didn't know that, that keep reoccurring every single day by about 80 to 90% of the time. Just think about that, 60,000 thoughts and 90% of those things are reoccurring. Majority of those, sadly, are actually negative ones. Because when we do allow ourselves space to recognize, not to get into the story about it, but just to see what we need to see, when we're present to do that, what we're actually encouraging ourselves to do is to be mindful, which I know we've spoken about for those who've been part of our programs. For those of you who've been part of our last session, Lindsay and Sarah spoke about that so powerfully. And to just be conscious with what is. See what we need to see to make an empowering choice rather than one that is reactive because we're allowing that conditioning to influence what we do. Okay. Having the space. If there's no space, we'll go straight back to those reactive programs. The second thing is just to fully acknowledge oneself, fully acknowledge you as is, warts and all, good or bad, for however you perceive that to be, but just allowing yourself to be you and celebrating. Oh my gosh, look at that trigger. Okay, all of a sudden now there's a beautiful lesson for you because you're a unique human being. We can't be someone that we're not. We are absolutely beautiful as we are. And so that's actually giving oneself permission to be vulnerable. And on being vulnerable, gosh, it's about encouraging the sharing of emotions. So when I share how I'm feeling, right now I'm feeling quite frustrated with what you're doing. Or right now, gosh, I'm feeling quite sad. Because our emotions actually are really an indication that something might need attention. And they actually give us incredible, powerful platform to grow from. And remember that when you start to express yourself and allow yourself to be vulnerable, then you're giving your children permission to do the same. They don't make it wrong, but they see the gift that it has. And when we allow that sense of acknowledging self, when we allow ourselves permission to be vulnerable and to share our emotions, then what we're actually doing is we're encouraging an incredible self-awareness, and we're also encouraging compassion. So next, you might want to move those 2 slides along there, love. And that's compassion for ourselves. And of course, when we're compassionate with ourselves, we can be compassionate with other people too. Okay, and so the other thing is that when we start to give ourselves permission to explore, to make mistakes, to try something new that we don't even know the outcome to, so we allow that rumbling and discomfort that Brené Brown talks about so powerfully. When we allow that element of uncertainty, which we know is the one thing that brings up that threat response, allowing ourselves to fail, then what we're actually doing is we're strengthening our ability to create, and we're also allowing ourselves to be more agile, to morph with what we don't know, to start to create different solutions based on what we have rather than what we don't. And so another thing that I always found is so powerful is just encouraging feedback, and feedback for yourself. You know, often we look for external answers, external solutions, external affirmations, but what about actually allowing yourselves to encourage your own sense of feedback through powerful questions that enable your own self-reflection? Asking things like, gosh, what did I learn from this? What would I do next time that would be different, rather than going externally to find the answers and solutions, which I know so many of us are so conditioned to do. I don't know. Well, in actual fact, you are. You are the answer to every question that you might actually ask of yourself. We just need to allow ourselves space to look. So this is about being purposeful, about acknowledging what you appreciate about yourself, what you appreciate about your children, through not just what you do, but actually from who you're being. So acknowledging things like, I really love your courage. Your creativity truly inspires me. The way you care for people touches my heart. You know what I love about you? You're just not afraid to try things out. How can we start to acknowledge the things that we want more of? Because remember, the more we do that, the stronger they start to grow. Now, when we encourage that feedback, when we encourage that self-appreciation, what we're actually doing is we're now empowering responsibility, and we're also empowering self-empowerment, not waiting for other people to do it for us. Because when we start that, the more we start to focus on what we want for ourselves and what we want for our children, so that they can show up powerfully in this beautiful, dynamic, challenging, threatening, oh my goodness, uncertain world that we have, what we focus on will grow. And that power of consciousness, which remembers that energetic force, will actually start to play in your favor, bringing you more and more of what you start to focus your attention on. That then becomes a new belief, a new program, and all of a sudden that law of resonance starts to play in your favor. All of a sudden you start to manifest things and results that you actually want, which is really the power of attraction, the law of attraction that we call. We attract the results that we want to get, and of course that's influenced by those unconscious programs that we have. And that will actually empower you to live independent of your fears, of your conditioning, and in return giving you and your children an infinite power and freedom to be unique and to move with the journey of life that is constant, and it will always be challenging, because I always believe that life will throw you challenges that it believes that you need to learn for yourself. And that is just the powerful gift of consciousness, and it is most certainly the gift that we have as parents, to be more conscious. And that is all I have to share with you today. Thank you, David.
Fabulous, Sue. Thank you very, very much again for, the continuous conscious insight, for the gentle messaging, but also the call to action. And so with these engagements, with these connect sessions, we really do love to hear from you. We love to hear any of your comments. We would love some of your questions, maybe an observation, maybe a quote, maybe even an experience from your own challenges, trials, tribulations, victories, etc., of parenting. And I read a lovely quote. I can't remember who it was from, but they said, what is the single biggest challenge that you face as a parent? And he said, absolutely, unequivocally, undoubtedly, it's the kids. So, there are many who've been before us, and there are many who'll come after us. But are there any questions, observations, reflections, thoughts, comments for Sue, questions? We'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Steve. Saying that I love. So, Natasha?
Yeah, she relates to this, and it's helpful to remember, is our history does not have to be our destiny, and the same applies to parenting. Just because you were parented in a certain way doesn't mean you have to parent that way. Fabulous, absolutely wonderful insight, Natasha. And I think, if we think back to our Leading with Humanity thoughts, one of them is that it is a choice. Yes, biologically, there are sadly many people who don't have a choice about parenting, the biological process of a parent, but the conscious choice is still a choice. We can choose to parent more consciously or not. Lots of hands going up. The first one I see there is Paul Mbenenge, who himself has triplets, and I think they're all girls, if I remember, Paul.
2 girls and a boy, Steve. Hi,
sorry. Well, thank goodness for that.
Good to see you again, and thank you very much, Sue, for sharing that. And I think just giving the opportunity to, reflect really, and sort of introspect on how we be parents. I think for me, it's just an observation, just listening to that and just remembering that although you are parenting, they're not your kids. You don't own them. You just, you've just been given the opportunity to guide them through life. And so I think it's the challenge of acknowledging, even at 4 years old, that they're individuals with their own full mental capacity, where, they say, actually, Daddy, you can't, this is what it is. And you're like, okay, I have to fully acknowledge that for where it's coming from, and actually be inquisitive and inquire, why do you think that, as opposed to, no, this is why you will do that.
Yeah.
So thank you for, just reminding me, particularly today, about that actually they are, full individuals, as small as they are.
Absolutely. And I think what you shared there is so powerful. Sometimes the questions or the comments that our children can share with us is like, we can kind of react a little bit to that. And it's so beautiful to kind of say, gosh, that's interesting. What makes you say that? Because we don't know, because our reaction just comes from our own kind of mechanisms. But then all of a sudden, we start to really allow them to be quite inquisitive as to what really made me say that, or rather than kind of shutting them down. And I think that's very powerful, Paul. Thank you. And of course, we are most certainly our children's guides. We don't own them, really. And I know that's a very difficult one for many to acknowledge. Helen.
Hi, yeah, so my question is, how much it's a good idea to kind of show weakness, show vulnerability, to kind of say, I'm struggling with this, or I'm finding this difficult, I'm anxious about this, because I kind of feel the contrast between, so I parent my daughter by myself, she's a teenager, and I just want her to feel like totally secure and that she can get everything from me, and I don't want her to kind of lose confidence and have like a scrap of doubt that I can't solve everything. So I don't know how much, I should kind of treat her as an equal and kind of say, oh, I'm really struggling with this, I'm really anxious about this, on how much I should just be this person that she can totally rely on and not have to worry herself. I don't want her to worry about me. I don't know.
Yeah, and I hear you, Helen. And if I may just share that, whether and I fully acknowledge, obviously wanting to be able to solve, not kind of coming up as an element of doubt, but our energy of doubt is far more powerful than we actually think that it is. So even if we are trying to solve, if we're trying to do our best, but in actual fact, innately, we are really, really struggling and we're even doubting ourselves, just consider that it's being felt and experienced. It is, because those unconscious programs can be so massively impactful. And my wish is for you to see the gift that you might be giving, not just to your daughter, but to your dynamic, into actually allowing yourself to be vulnerable, to possibly say, when this happens, and it's always good to have an example, when this happens, it really makes me feel quite anxious. I know that you need this, and right now, I'm not able to afford that right now. And that, I think, would be a far more empowering way to not be so hard on yourself, to be everything and give everything, because then you're just conditioning your daughter to do the same, which is not really going to support her. Just an insight, perhaps, you to see. And I know that it's hard. Believe me, I know that it's hard, because we do as parents want to give our children everything. Thank you. You complete, Helen, or is there anything else that you want to ask?
No, that's good, thanks. I mean, I guess then it's okay to share stuff like that with a teenager, you think?
Absolutely. Because when it comes to a time in her life where she's not able to provide, or she's not able to, for whatever reason, I'm guessing that you would rather her be in a powerful position to be able to truly express where she's coming from, rather than to pretend that something is not the truth for her.
Yeah, that really makes sense in that context. If I'm trying to kind of provide an example of living well, then I don't want her in 10 years' time to think, oh, I'm anxious about this. Oh gosh, my mum was never anxious about anything, so I must be really struggling or really failing. So I guess if she sees the example that people do struggle and people do have insecurities, then she can feel happier with herself as an adult, maybe. I don't know.
Because many people do struggle, and I just think that we're too proud to be seen as weak, but it has massive consequences. Thank you, Helen. Martin?
Hi, Sue. Thanks again for today's session. That was really enlightening. Thank you. I've got two teenage daughters, and following on from what Helen was just saying, I think that I felt, maybe as dad, that there's been a lot of pressure on this kind of almost invulnerable superhero type approach that that parents can kind of do everything, and I think that over time, one thing that came to me is that sometimes you want to give that impression as often as you can, but sometimes that can kind of slip, and sometimes it's for good reasons. So even little things like, and I know it sounds a bit silly, but as a proud Welshman, every time I hear the Welsh national anthem or sing it at a rugby game, even against South Africa, a little kind of tear comes down the cheek. And my daughter has kind of seen this and has said, what's kind of going on here? So you explain, and I think that kind of helps to kind of to show that you've got a side of you there that's absolutely fine to show. And my youngest daughter now is just coming up to doing her exams, her GCSEs, and so she's coming to me with questions on things that I don't know the answer to. But I think that rather than in the past, whereas I would be tempted to kind of almost wing it, now it's more a case of, if I know, that's fine, and if I don't, well, then we'll both look for the answer together. So she's reading in her English exams, for instance, some books that I'm going to read at the same time that she is, so that if she wants to have a chat about it, hopefully I can kind of assist with that. And I think little things like that I've found to be really helpful, so that you don't try and put up a facade that, that isn't, kind of realistic to maintain, really, or yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Mom and dad don't know all the answers. Hell, I gave up on definitely maths a long time ago. And I ask, okay, darling, I cannot help you. Who can?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
Because I do know there have been times where I've given them the wrong answer for Afrikaans, which is our second language here in South Africa, and my children completely failed. So I never did that again. Yeah. I don't have to know all the answers, but let them discover, because when you empower them to go and look themselves as well, that is an incredible strength. Otherwise, they're always going to look back. Yeah, rely on other people, and you want them to be self-sufficient.
Yeah.
Awesome. Natasha, I see your hand is up, and I think you're muted.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I just wanted to share something along those lines. So I'm the mother of a 5-year-old boy and a 1-year-old girl, and I've found, also through research and my own parenting journey, that when your child is struggling with strong emotions or with dealing with whatever they're dealing with, it's like when they see you with your phone, basically. So you are always on your phone, and they will model that behavior because they see what you are doing. Everything you do, they will model, because you are their greatest teacher, obviously. But you can use that power in the same way when you have difficult feelings. If you explain them to your child, I'm feeling I've got a lot of big feelings right now, and I'm sorry, that's why I shouted at you. But now the way I'm going to make myself feel better is to do some breathing, or to just go for a walk outside. So at the same time as you expressing how you feel to them, you can also model the ways in which to control your feelings or to repair them, because while their brain is developing those mechanisms for self-control and logical thinking, you can help lay the connections in the brain to maybe that's what they will be using later in life.
Absolutely.
Sorry, it's a bit of a ramble.
No, it's so beautiful. Thank you, Natasha, because yeah, I mean, our children are a complete mirror of what they see in us. And as I shared, if we're not going to show them that, when we start to recognize becoming emotional, which we haven't made wrong in the first place, and we allow ourselves to create that space to just reflect, take a breath, which we know allows our brain just a little bit of oxygen to keep functioning and be realistic and rational.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a beautiful example for them to actually be able to take that step back, which of course we've learned more and more around enabling our prefrontal part of our brain, rather than our very old primitive reptilian brain, to completely dominate the way that we show up. Beautiful.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you.
So Sue, Helen's put a beautiful comment there on the chat group, and I think it needs to be shared here. It's what this is teaching me is the importance of showing myself authentically as a model for my daughter's future happiness, rather than thinking, what does she need right now as a teenager? What a lovely reflection about the future state. And I think it was Barbara Johnson who said that to be in our children's memories tomorrow, we need to be present in their lives today. And so it's a beautiful balance, isn't it, about what do they need today, but also this extraordinary forecasting, because as parents, I guess we only get our first performance review after about 20 years. and it's not always going to be a good one. But you know, what is that performance review going to look like in 20 years' time?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And also, like Steve, adding to that, be someone that your children choose to come home to.
Mm.
That for me has been one of the greatest gifts. I think someone had their hand up, Steve. Natasha, your hand is still up. I'm not too sure if it's from before or there we go.
Again, Sue, just a thought that came to me, because what you said right in the beginning, and one of the lovely comments on the slides up front was, you know, one of the greatest leadership challenges there really is parenting, right? It is about influence. It is about a choice. It is about the state of being. It is about constant giving. I mean, you're just constantly giving. And so, you know, that lovely thought that leadership's 3 words at the moment, which are so powerful, is I'm not sure.
Yes.
That one of the 3 powerful words in leadership is emerging is, look, I'm not sure. Who really knows? And which parent really knows the exact answer at the right time every time? So I think just being comfortable with that for me. There are times when we need to be quite sure, and that might be about the boundaries we've set, I guess. But at other times, how do we invite them into a part of the conversation so that they also feel a sense of autonomy?
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love that. So true.
And Michaela's got her hand up too. Yep. And Livia. Wow, they're coming through thick and fast.
Yes, hi, I'm out for a walk here in the Finnish archipelago. It's very sunny. It's spring here, so it's really nice. But I'm going to put off the camera since I'm here walking. Thank you, Sue, so much. It was once again so inspiring and important. And I just got back to a memory or something that was really important for me when we were with you in the South African bush, and we talked about partly the same things, and kind of that to understand yourself, you have to go back 7 generations. And this has been very meaningful for me, and I always get back to this. But what I realized that with my children, I have 2 teenagers, a girl and a boy, and like their 7 generations, I mean, they don't come all from me. Half of them comes from their father, and I think that makes it so tricky somehow, that there are those 7 generations that I don't have a clue of, that is kind of half of my children. And then those surprises come where you look at your children like, where did you get that from? I have no clue. I don't understand. And I just wanted to share this memory that I had and how it popped up now during this session.
Yeah. And knowing that we are a product of all those generations, seeing it for what it is, seeing what is serving us as a unit now, and possibly also then making a choice as to how we want to show up now, moving forward. Because otherwise we'll continually take those generational things with us, and especially the ones that we don't want. Take the ones that you love, but sort of start to chip away, like that statue of David, the things that are not serving you as a little unit today. Because that is what you can actually influence more than anything. Thank you, Michaela.
Yes, thank you.
Livia?
Hi. So I wanted to share some good news with everybody. I gave birth to my son 10 months ago in the Netherlands. And Sue, you mentioned at the beginning of your presentation that they don't come with a manual. So I am happy to say that, yes, the Dutch do give a manual with the child until the age of 4. In this manual, everything is written, all the recommendations, even what we were talking about, that we have to share our feelings and talk to the child. Everything is written in this manual. It's really exciting.
Oh, fabulous. Fabulous, fabulous.
So yeah, the Dutch, actually I heard that the Dutch children are one of the happiest children in the world. So they must be doing something right.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons why I do love working with Dutch people is because they are so real. They are so not afraid to express themselves 100%. They are fabulous. I mean, I'm not surprised. Yeah, it's
So
beautiful.
at one point I had a question, because there is a consultation office, and every mom or parent can ring them. And at one point I had a question about, let's say, what is the right time, when is the right time to give the child an egg, for example. And the lady on the phone said, you haven't read the manual? It's all written there.
Or perhaps, well, give it a bash, and if the egg doesn't sit well, then you know not to give it for a while, you know. So there's that beautiful saying that when the student is ready, the teacher will arrive. And of course, the student and the teacher can come up in different shapes and forms, can't they? Same principle applies to parenting. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. Thank you. May you enjoy your beautiful years with your baby.
Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Happy
And
to
thank
have
you for this wonderful presentation. It's a
Oh,
very good reminder of how to be myself, truly, because sometimes I think we all forget that to bring out the authentic selves
Indeed.
is very important.
Absolutely. Thank
Thank you.
Thank you. I know some people are having to knock off, and yeah, so thank you. I've really loved putting this together, and thank you for all your powerful sharings, and just go and be the most beautiful, real, authentic, free, and powerful parents that you can possibly be, with no expectations. No expectations. I think that for me is one of the greatest gifts that you can give yourself and your children. Thank you everyone for being here. I don't know if there are any more hands raised. If you do have another question, you can stay on, but those that need to go are more than welcome to go. David, I do see your hand is up. Yes. Thank you so much. Enjoy your day. Thank you, Paul. Lovely to see you again.
Sue, well done. I know that there will be a few people staying on, and again, thank you to all of those who did pitch up and participate. Thank you very, very much for your presence. We're always the richer for your presence. So to everybody signing off, it was a real pleasure. There will be a few more of these. Please look out for them in the next number of weeks. We're trying to run them once a month or once every 6 weeks, I think it is next. So we got some exciting ones lined up. But Sue, especially to you before the recording ends, thank you very much for the effort that you do put into these webinars. It is so much more than just a 40-minute presentation. I know that. And you really do it beautifully, and you do it with great humility. It was, Paul has left the group, but he did remind me when he came on of a...
Paul is here?
Is he? Oh, Paul, I thought he'd left. So Paul, you reminded me when you spoke about the very first Father's Day card I ever received. And it was, of course, from my daughter, and it said, any man can be a father, but it takes somebody special to be a dad. And I think there's something conscious about the difference between the biological role of just the father, or the power construct of being the father of the house, to somebody that's referred to as mom or mommy or dad. And Sue, I think you too are not just a mother, but you're a mom. So thank you very much to all of you. On this call, there's some extraordinary leaders, some extraordinary grandparents, some extraordinary moms and dads. And I wish we just had more time to learn from all of you. I think it was Mick Finn who reminded me that it's no wonder that grandparents and grandchildren get along so well. It's because they have a common enemy. And as parents, I think we feel stretched between our own parents and our own children. But thank you, Sue. And again, we will be around for the next few minutes. Nix, I don't know if there was anything more you needed us to say from an admin point of view, but well done. And thank you for your presence.